Hey guys, Hamsterwheel here with a new video, and today we're going to talk a little bit about Naxxramas. More specifically, my predictions for Naxxramas when it will go live on Classic WoW. Now the last time we got to see Naxxramas in its original form, by Blizzard at least, was in 2006, so that was almost 14 years ago. Few people back then got to see it, and when original Naxxramas was replaced in the Wrath of the Lich King expansion, there was no way to go back and check that place out, at least on Blizzard's official servers. And since then, there's always been an air of mystery around that place. And throughout the years, the legendary difficulty would be mentioned over and over again in conversations about raiding in vanilla. And well, my video definitely added fuel to that fire, and it proves there is a huge interest in the classic version of Naxxramas. Now, admittedly that video I made wasn't perfect. I mean, there were a few mistakes in that video, which is why I revisited that video a while after publishing it, as well as making a third video where I talked about this raid once again after I cleared it on a private server. And well, today we're getting closer and closer to seeing Naxxramas come to Classic. I mean, sure, we still have Ahn'Qiraj to look forward to, but since there's a lot of hype and curiosity around this raid, in my humble opinion, I'd like to share with you my thoughts and predictions on what's going to happen with Naxxramas in Classic WoW. Now let's start off with itemization. I've stated multiple times that I'm not pleased with the way Blizzard handled items in Classic WoW. Many items that people are wearing right now used to be much weaker in the beginning of the game. So it didn't come to my surprise that even regular guilds were steamrolling through content like Molten Core and Blackwing Lair. Of course, there's a ton of other factors why that's the case, but let's just focus on this one for now. So basically what I'm trying to say is that people were doing early vanilla content with late vanilla gear, which really skewed the balance in my opinion. However, the later we move down the line of raids, the more the content is going to catch up with the gear. And in Naxxramas, most of the items and their itemization will be equal to the actual raid content that's released. Basically, there's no more advantage of having gear that is more powerful than it was way back in vanilla, when for instance Molten Core was the only raid available. Apart from maybe one or two items, but most of them will match the patch that Naxxramas was released in. Next up, we gotta talk about world buffs. Now this is going to be a big topic for raiding guilds that want to raid Naxxramas. Right now, world buffs are a bit of a novelty. I mean, do we really need them to clear Blackwing Lair and Zul'Gurub? Not really. I mean, the only reason people get world buffs now is to be more powerful and get the raid done quicker. There's just no boss that is undoable without world buffs in Blackwing Lair. In Naxxramas, however, things are quite different. And while I believe that every boss should be doable without world buffs, some bosses are admittedly extremely hard without them. Especially if your guild steps into Naxxramas for the first time and isn't wearing any of the raid gear that drops there yet. Patchwork is a really good example, as that is considered to be a gear check, and it's a boss me and my old guild on Chaos always got world buffs for before we attempted to clear the entire wing. The enrage timer on Patchwork really leaves very little wiggle room, so these world buffs will become much more important and much more of a necessity. And because of that, losing world buffs is going to hurt a lot more. Not just in a wipe, but also in the world environment, which is a nice segue to the next thing I want to talk about. You see, with Classic WoW having way more people on one server, the eastern Plaguelands will probably be the new hotbed for ganking, as people will have to take the flight path to Light's Hope Chapel and then walk to the entrance of Naxxramas, which is close to Stratholme. So that trip from the flight path to the actual entrance is going to be one hell of a dangerous road. Not to mention that with so many players on one server compared to vanilla WoW, the chance of ganking is even higher than normal. Unless Blizzard decides to bring back layering once again. We'll just have to wait and see. Oh, by the way, the entrance to Naxxramas is just a small ziggurat with a portal, so this area will be another place where entire guilds can be wiped out by a bunch of mages with AoE spells or a multi-boxer. I predict that there's going to be a lot more frustration in guilds when it comes to losing world buffs, and some extra hostility between guilds on a particular server. Another thing that will create more frustration in guilds is the higher list of required consumables. No longer will a flask of supreme power, a wizard oil, and maybe one or two extra buffs be enough just to clear stuff. Oh no, Naxxramas requires you to carry a lot of resistance potions as well, which to be fair already get introduced in Ankiraj with bosses like Huhuran, so you can get used to having a stack of resistance potions in your bag. But with Naxxramas, it's next level. You'll need resistance potions for multiple schools of magic, and when your guild gets pretty far into Naxxramas, you'll start to burn through those really quick. With bosses like Loatheb, the Four Horsemen, Saffron and kel'thuzad requiring a lot of resistance potions if your guild hasn't got those bosses on farm yet. Which also means the prices of mats to create those potions will go up in price significantly. Basically what I'm trying to say is that raiding will be a lot more expensive in Naxxramas, and wipes will be a lot more painful for you and your supply of raiding mats and gold. Just be prepared. Expensive wipes like that can really wear people out and make them not want to do Naxxramas anymore, as it's a huge time and gold sink. So what about the bosses themselves? How fast do I think stuff will get cleared? Well, I think guilds like APES will probably zerg through most of the bosses in Naxxramas in no time. But then again, we're talking about one of the best, if not the best raiding guild in Classic, and it's unfair to look at how fast they're clearing it and then decide Naxxramas isn't hard at all. I mean, it's like saying a game like Ninja Gaiden is actually pretty easy because some speedrunner who practiced thousands and thousands of hours managed to beat it in less than half an hour with no deaths. I'm interested in seeing if they can actually manage to clear the entire raid before the weekly reset, as a boss like Saffron requires a lot of frost resistance gear, at least based on what we currently know in terms of tactics. And that frost resistance gear can't be obtained beforehand. The glacial set, for instance, for casters will only be available when Naxxramas is actually live, so it's not like you can craft this stuff weeks before it comes out. You have to step into Naxxramas to obtain frozen runes that are scattered throughout the instance, which means you have to clear a big chunk of the raid to begin with to get a good amount of frozen runes for craftable gear, and then you can start crafting that stuff. And like I said, having a high amount of frost resistance is a must for Saffron. I mean, we're talking 130 to 170 resistance unbuffed for casters and 210 to 250 frost resistance to melees and hunters. Yes, that is the recommended amount of unbuffed frost resistance you need for Saffron based on the current knowledge on how to kill this boss. So I'm really curious to see if top guilds will get the Saffron in the first night and how they're gonna tackle it. I mean, you can't compensate a big lag of frost resistance gear with frost resistance potions, because they all have a 2-minute cooldown and these wear off really fast. But yeah, that's for the absolute creme de la creme guilds to think about. The more regular guilds, however, well, I think some people might not want to raid Naxxramas seriously at all. If Blizzard follows the timeline of original WoW, Naxxramas will be released in a time where the Burning Crusade won't be released long after. Which back then was also a reason why some guilds stopped really caring about Naxxramas, as the gear mattered a lot less as soon as you could level to 70 and start doing things like normal and heroic dungeons. So if Blizzard does intend to release the Burning Crusade not too long after Naxxramas, I think a lot of guilds might not actually be motivated enough to try and clear it, also considering how much of a time and gold sink it is. I think most guilds will definitely try to at least clear 1 or 2 bosses, but I predict some will not want to seriously do it and just wait till the Burning Crusade goes live. Of course, on the other side of the coin, there's probably a lot of hardcore raiding guilds that do want to try and clear it. I mean, after all those years of speculation and discussion around Naxxramas, this will be the only time to attempt to clear that raid when we're still all level 60. You're probably not going to get another shot at this, unless Blizzard decides to split up Burning Crusade server with classic servers, so you get to keep your level 60 character, but we don't know how they're gonna handle that as of right now. As for clearing bosses, I think most guilds who will set foot in Naxxramas will at least be able to kill Instructor Vesuvius and Anubra Khan. These are considered to be the easier bosses of Naxxramas and aren't really hard on world buffs and consumables. Patchwork will be a lot tougher because, like I said before, it is a huge gear check and world buffs are more of a necessity here. So it all depends on how chaotic the first couple of weeks will be and if your guild actually managed to get into Naxxramas with most of its members still having their world buffs up, considering the high chance of getting ganked while trying to get there. Noth the Playbringer is another boss I think a lot of guilds will also be able to clear, as it's admittedly also not an extremely hard fight. From there on out though, I think guilds will start to hit a bit of a brick wall. For instance, the dance from Hagen is not to be underestimated, and the positioning here is key, with one wrong position potentially wiping out half your raid, Gothic the Harvester requiring a lot of coordination with your guild with the ads, and the list goes on and on. So let me summarize what I talked about and my predictions for when Naxxramas will hit Classic. First up, there's no more advantages to be gained with gear and how it's itemized, as the raid content will have caught up to the state the gear is currently in. World buffs will start to become a much bigger necessity and will probably cause a fair amount of hostility on your server, with gankers and competing guilds trying to wipe each other when trying to get the Naxxramas. Consumables will also become a much bigger part of raiding, which can lead to some guilds and players getting worn out and ultimately not wanting to do Naxxramas anymore due to the amount of preparations required. Another factor that could come into play is how exactly Blizzard will release the Burning Crusade, and if they follow the original timeline, it could also be a reason for people being demotivated to run Naxxramas. In terms of guilds clearing bosses in Naxxramas, I suspect the top guilds to roll through most of Naxxramas without too much of a problem. I mean, yes, it's hard, but at the end of the day, all the tactics are already out there, so in terms of that, you can start reading up months before Naxxramas actually drops. Though I suspect bosses like the Four Horsemen and especially Saffron to be a problem for them. Four Horsemen because it is considered to be one of the hardest fights in Naxxramas, and to some even the hardest boss fight, and Saffron simply because of the huge amount of frost resistance gear required to do that boss. Most serious raiding guilds will probably kill a couple of bosses in Naxxramas, while probably struggling a lot with Loathep, the Four Horsemen, and like the top guild, Saffron will be a huge frost resistance gear check for them. And I predict the most killed bosses will probably be Instructor Vesuvius and Anubra Khan. And there you go folks, my thoughts and predictions for Naxxramas in Classic. It's still kind of far away with Anki Rush still having to be released, but I thought it was a fun little video to make, and hey, we'll see if my predictions will be right or not. I guess time will tell. And that's gonna do it for now. As always, I want to thank you for watching this video. I'm Hamsterwheel and have a good one.